Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel, where the biggest betrayals are whispered at quiet dinner tables, and the loudest goodbyes don't need a single word. The mashed potatoes were cold. That's the first thing I remember. Not the tension, not the candlelight, not even her sister's smug face across from me. Just the forkful of cold potatoes on my tongue as my wife casually destroyed me in front of her entire family. No introductions tonight, no backstory. Just a moment frozen in time. A dinner I'll never unlive. We were halfway through the meal when it happened. Tessa had been swirling her wine since the appetizer, and by dessert, her filter had thinned to nothing. Her dad was droning on about how he knew real men when he saw them, and her brother was cracking jokes that always somehow landed on me. It was like they took turns playing who can make Lyle feel small tonight. Then, as if rehearsed, her mom raised her glass and said, "To strong marriages." A toast. Forced. Hollow. Tessa raised her glass too, but didn't drink. Instead, she looked straight at me, smiled, and said the line that would end everything. "Honestly, if I could go back, I'd probably marry someone with a bit more spine." No one gasped. No one scolded her. They just stared at their plates, like they'd heard it before, like this was normal. Even I didn't react. Not right away. I felt the heat in my face, the buzzing in my ears, the twitch in my fingertips gripping the edge of the table. My stomach sank. But what cut deepest wasn't the insult. It was the fact that she said it with complete ease, like commenting on the weather. I wasn't her partner. I was her public punching bag. I looked around the table and saw it clearly for the first time. They never respected me because she never did. And that was the moment I knew I was the only one surprised by what she said. I stood up, quietly. I didn't throw my napkin. I didn't slam the door. I just walked out of that dining room like a ghost finally realizing he'd been dead for years. I walked 5 blocks in the rain to my car. I didn't even drive home, because something snapped in me that night. And the worst part? I still had no idea how deep the betrayal really went. Not yet. I didn't have a destination when I left that dinner table. Just the overwhelming need to not exist in that room anymore. The rain soaked through my jacket within minutes, but I welcomed it. Felt honest. Unlike her. Unlike all of them. I ended up at a 24-hour laundromat 3 blocks down, sitting on a cracked orange bench next to a row of humming machines. I wasn't there to wash clothes, just to sit, to think, to let my phone buzz in my pocket without looking. I knew it was her, and I knew whatever she was writing wasn't an apology. She wouldn't apologize. Tessa didn't do apologies. She did justifications. Cold, rational, blame-shifting monologues masked as explanations. And I was always the audience, nodding like a fool, wanting peace more than pride. But not this time. Not after hearing that sentence. Someone with a bit more spine. It played on a loop in my head like a twisted lullaby. Her family's silence still rang louder than the words themselves. No one defended me, not even a chuckle to soften the blow. That silence was a verdict, one they'd agreed on long before I ever showed up. Eventually, I checked my phone. 5 texts from her. All short. All surgical. That was a joke. Grow up. Seriously, why are you making a scene? If you leave like this, it's on you. Don't embarrass me. You're overreacting. I laughed. Out loud. In the middle of a laundromat at 9:47 p.m. That sort of laughter where the pain leaks through the cracks. The kind of laugh that feels like it's punching its way out of your ribs. But then I made a mistake. I went to our shared cloud album. I don't know why, maybe to remind myself there was once warmth, once a reason to stay. I shouldn't have done that, because right there, clear as day, was a photo I had never seen. Tessa in a hotel mirror holding 2 glasses of champagne. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at someone just off frame. The caption? "One night to remember." And the timestamp? The same weekend she'd said she was visiting her aunt. That was the moment my breath stopped. Not from shock, but from the slow, crushing realization that I had been erased long ago. I just hadn't noticed. But now I had. I stared at the photo for a long time. The lighting was warm, golden, intimate. Her makeup was perfect. her hair done in soft waves she never wore for me. She held 2 champagne flutes like she was mid-laugh, caught in a moment that wasn't meant to be captured, and definitely not meant for me to see. But there it was. A souvenir from a weekend she swore was spent helping her aunt sort through estate paperwork. The real kicker? Her aunt passed away 5 years ago. I remember. I drove her to the funeral. I should have thrown the phone across the laundromat. Instead, I just zoomed in. Behind her reflection in the mirror, barely visible in the corner of the photo, was a man's shoulder. Gray suit, black collar, no face. But somehow, that blurry edge of a stranger felt more real to her than I had in months. I sat frozen, my fingers cold, the scent of detergent mixing with betrayal. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. Not well anyway. Which meant one thing. She didn't believe I'd ever leave. She thought I'd just take it, like I always did. And honestly, she had every reason to think that. I'd let her walk over me for years. She cut me off when I spoke too slowly. She corrected me in front of strangers. She spent weekends with friends and left me alone folding laundry. And I made excuses for all of it. Because I didn't want to be alone. Because I thought love was endurance. But in that moment, sitting alone, drenched, heart hammering with humiliation, I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. I was afraid of staying with her. Staying in a life where I was a ghost who paid the bills, smiled in family photos, and slept beside a woman already gone. I left the laundromat and drove. Not home. Not yet. I parked in an empty grocery lot and opened my laptop. I had her passwords. I never used them before, but she gave them to me. Probably out of arrogance, not trust. Within minutes, I was in her email, then her travel records. That hotel? It wasn't booked for one. It was reserved under her name and another. I clicked the second name. And when I saw it, when I saw who it was, I actually said, no, 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 out loud, like saying it might undo it, because it wasn't just some stranger. It was someone who had once toasted our anniversary. Someone who knew where I kept my spare house key. Someone I thought I could trust with my life. It was Beckett. Of all people, him. My old roommate, my best man. The guy who once helped me pick out the engagement ring she now wore like dead weight. I stared at his name on the booking confirmation until it blurred. My stomach turned in slow, nauseating circles. This was someone who used to crash on my couch when his relationships imploded. Someone who knew how long it took me to save up for that honeymoon in Savannah. Someone who toasted our future, all while quietly carving a place in hers. The anger didn't hit me like a wave. It dripped in, slow and scalding. I thought of every time she smiled when his name popped up on her phone. Every time she laughed a little too long at his jokes. How she insisted he was just going through a rough patch. When I questioned why he kept coming around, she said I was insecure, jealous, overthinking. Turns out I wasn't thinking nearly hard enough. I opened more emails. This time, I couldn't stop myself. I read messages that made my face burn. Plans, jokes at my expense, nicknames they shared that sounded intimate in the worst way. In one message, she referred to me as Mr. Vanilla. In another, Beckett wrote, "He still doesn't suspect? You really did marry the blindest man in America." She replied with a laughing emoji and the words, "Lyle's harmless. Always has been." That did it. More than the hotel. More than the photo. That sentence felt like a nail driven through everything I tried to build. I was a joke to them. A safety net. Placeholder. All those nights I stayed up late helping her rewrite resumes. The loans I co-signed. The therapy I suggested when she said she felt emotionally trapped. None of it mattered. I was the man she used to look stable, while loving someone else behind closed doors. My hands shook, but not out of rage, out of humiliation. The worst kind. The kind where you realize everyone else knew what you didn't. I remembered a party 6 months ago. Beckett had brought her a drink. She had smiled in that soft way she never smiled at me anymore. My own sister had asked that night, "You're not worried about those two?" And I laughed. Laughed. I didn't laugh now. I drove home on autopilot, barely remembering the streets. When I got there, the lights were off. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I walked into the house. our house, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I belonged there. I sat down at the dining table, the one we bought together at that overpriced boutique downtown, and I opened my notebook. Not to write poetry, not a breakup letter, plan, not for revenge, not for chaos, but to finally walk away in a way she'd never expect. Silently but completely. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't cry either. There were no dramatic breakdowns, no shouting into pillows. Just quiet. The kind that creeps into your bones when the final illusion breaks. I sat at that dining table for hours, staring at the things around me. The framed wedding photo on the wall, the scented candle she loved, the coffee mugs we bought as a his and hers joke. All of it felt like stage props now. A set built to fool guests into thinking everything was fine. But I had seen behind the curtain, and there was nothing left worth pretending for. I started packing before sunrise. Not frantically, not emotionally, methodically. The way you might pack if you were leaving a hotel and never planning to return. I took only what was mine. Clothes, laptop, my grandfather's watch, the journals she never read. I didn't slam drawers or throw things in anger. I folded each item neatly. Every movement was a quiet decision. I left the ring on the bathroom sink. Not because I wanted her to see it, but because I didn't want to take it with me. That band had meant everything to me once. Now, it felt like a symbol of who I used to be, the man who thought loyalty meant silence. I wrote a note, not poetic, not dramatic, just 12 words on a torn sheet of printer paper. You broke something I'll never try to fix again. Take care of yourself. I didn't leave it on her pillow like in the movies. I taped it to the fridge, right next to the shopping list she wrote the day before, as if life were normal. Almond milk, eggs, champagne. The irony almost made me laugh. At 6:32 a.m., I walked out the front door, backpack over one shoulder, suitcase in hand. The neighborhood was still asleep. I got into my car, pulled out of the driveway, and never once looked in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. That house was no longer part of my story. I didn't go to a friend's place. Beckett had made sure that circle wasn't safe. I didn't go to my parents. We hadn't spoken in months since they told me I should be grateful to have someone like Tessa. Instead, I drove 3 hours north, booked a month-to-month rental near the coast under my middle name, and turned my phone off. Not airplane mode. Off. I went completely dark. Because disappearing wasn't about revenge, it was about peace. About finally reclaiming a piece of myself that had been chipped away, insult by insult, lie by lie. She wanted a man with more spine. She'd get her wish. Because for the first time, I wasn't staying to fix anything. I was leaving to save myself. And still, deep down, I knew she wouldn't take it quietly. Women like Tessa don't lose control. They chase it. And I had just broken her favorite illusion. 3 days. That's how long it took for the silence to reach her. 3 whole days where I didn't answer her texts, didn't open her calls, didn't react to the messages she left through mutual friends. At first, I thought she might just move on quickly. After all, she had Beckett. Maybe she'd just shrug me off like a bad investment. But Tessa didn't want love. She wanted power. And when I disappeared without drama, without begging, without even slamming the door, I robbed her of the control she'd always held over me. On the 4th day, I turned my phone on, not to reply, but out of morbid curiosity. Over 60 missed calls. 48 texts. The last one said, "Lyle, this isn't funny. Where are you? We need to talk. Please." There was no apology. No remorse. Just panic wrapped in entitlement. Her words didn't sound like a wife afraid she lost her husband. They sounded like someone trying to locate a misplaced item she assumed would always be there. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, she called my sister. That's when it got ugly. My sister, bless her heart, had always seen right through Tessa. She told me countless times that I was shrink-wrapping my soul to keep someone else warm. When Tessa asked if she knew where I was, my sister said only, "He's gone. And he doesn't owe you anything anymore." That lit the match. Tessa exploded. She sent a new message. "So this is how you handle conflict? By vanishing like a coward?" Then another. "Wow, You were always too weak for a real woman. And then she crossed a line. She messaged my employer. She told HR I was emotionally unstable and might need monitoring. She tried to set off alarms to make me look like I'd snapped. I found out when my boss called me directly. Not concerned, but confused. Thankfully, I'd always been the dependable one at work. And unlike Tessa, my boss actually listened when I calmly explained the situation, keeping it vague enough to protect myself, but clear enough that she'd burned a bridge she couldn't rebuild. That was her first real loss. Not me, not the marriage, but the narrative. She couldn't paint me as the villain because I wasn't playing the role she expected. There were no tantrums, no threats, just distance. Cold, painful, irreversible distance. But then, Beckett reached out, and what he told me shattered the last piece of sympathy I had left for her. Turns out I wasn't even the first, or the only one. There was more, so much more. When I saw Beckett's name pop up in my inbox, I nearly deleted it on instinct. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. His subject line just said, "You need to know this." I opened it. No greeting, no explanation, just a 3-line message that rewired my entire understanding of what I'd been living through. It read, "I'm done covering for her. You weren't the first. I was just dumb enough to think I'd be the last. She lies to everyone. Lyle. I'm sorry." I read it 5 times. Then I stared at the screen like it might somehow rewrite itself into something less humiliating. But the words stayed the same, blunt, final, loaded with implications. I replied once, short and cold, "How long?" His answer came 5 minutes later. "Since before your first anniversary." And she was seeing someone else when we were still involved. My stomach turned. So it wasn't just one affair. It was a pattern. A life built on rotation. A cycle of replacements where I had been just another quiet stepping stone. I thought I'd been the betrayal. Turns out I was just a betrayal. She had rehearsed this. She'd walked this road before, probably perfected the timing. I wasn't the main character in her deception, I was background noise. And Beckett, for all his smug confidence, had been fooled too. The man who helped destroy my marriage now stood outside the wreckage, realizing he'd only been a temporary tenant in a house of illusions. I should have felt some bitter satisfaction in that. I didn't. Just deeper exhaustion. I started looking back at all the subtle signs that hadn't made sense before. The frequent business trips that never had receipts. The coworkers I was never allowed to meet. The one night she came home wearing someone else's cologne and claimed it was from hugging a client's wife. I remembered how she once left her phone unlocked on the counter, and when I glanced at a message that just said, "Same room again?" she snapped it out of my hands like a criminal shielding evidence. And I remembered how she made me feel crazy for even noticing. That's the part that kept circling my mind. Not just the betrayal itself, but how thoroughly she convinced me it was my fault for doubting her. I had apologized for things I didn't do. I'd promised to communicate better while she was texting strangers from our bed. I thought I was fighting for love. I was just shadowboxing in a room she never planned to stay in. I didn't respond to Beckett again. He'd served his purpose. His confession didn't redeem him, but it gave me closure, the final missing piece. It wasn't just that she had betrayed me with him. It's that she never intended to stop. It was who she was. And now, I was done grieving the woman I thought I married. It was time to face the one she really was. I never confronted her. I didn't send her a dramatic message. I didn't forward Beckett's emails or demand answers I already knew she'd twist. Tessa thrived on drama. She needed the performance. And I refused to give her a final scene. What she got instead was a silence she couldn't control, and a man who no longer needed her permission to move forward. The first few weeks were hard. I'm not going to lie and pretend healing came fast. The mornings were the worst. Waking up alone in a quiet apartment, instinctively reaching for someone who had never truly been there. But slowly, that silence became something else. Peaceful. Liberating. It was the sound of a life that finally belonged to me. I started running again. I stopped checking my phone every 2 minutes. I took a weekend trip to a coastal town I'd always talked about visiting but never did because Tessa wasn't into small towns. I sat in a coffee shop, read an entire book in one sitting, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to prove my worth to anyone. I was enough. Just me. 3 months later, I filed for divorce. She never replied to the papers. I think she knew there was nothing left to salvage. She did, however, try to reach out one last time. A single email. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. Can we talk? I archived it. Not out of anger, but because it no longer mattered. Her voice no longer had power in my world. And now, a year later, I can say this without shaking. I'm grateful. Grateful she said that one sentence at dinner. Grateful I walked away. Grateful I didn't wait for an apology that would never come. Because that moment, that cold, humiliating, quiet moment, set me free. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm rebuilding. And for anyone out there holding on to someone who makes you feel small, I'll tell you this: you don't need fire to end something toxic. Sometimes walking away in silence is the loudest, bravest thing you'll ever do. Have you ever made a quiet exit that changed your entire life? Share your story in the comments, and tell us about a moment in history where someone turned pain into power. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned to Reddit Confessions, where your voice turns truth into legacy.